Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Good? Okay. I just think about this morning that, we've been approaching by the end of September, but it's still quite warm, isn't it? I think it's kind of global warming influence. Yeah.
This is not normal?
No, it's not normal.
Okay.
Usually, yeah, usually we're expecting the autumn season right now. Okay. So welcome to Cross-Cultural Management Week 4 lecture. Okay, so we ended up our lecture last week on Nick's exercise, the cultural map, right? And you know that in the context of cross-cultural management, researchers have developed this 8 dimensions of cultural map, especially in work context. And they suggest the companies can use this tool to build a team. And I used this in my other courses to build a team as well. And so this a tool kind of visualize culture using these 8 dimensions. I think it's quite helpful to make the collaboration as effective as possible because not only they consider a different cultural background among the team members, but also you can be selective if you want to get a team much more harmonized. You probably can choose your teammates with much more similar backgrounds. Okay. But I think it depends. But essentially in this course, for instance, in the X Culture project you're going to participate very soon, essentially they want to build a diverse team, okay, as much as possible. Okay. And I'm not sure if you have done a survey. Have you done a survey? No? If not, you can still do it right now. Okay, it's quite a short survey about 8 dimensions. Just select the items you think that best describe of your personal backgrounds. Okay. So once you've done the survey, please think about the questions on the slide. I listed a couple of questions. The first one is, how would you describe your ways of doing things by these 8-dimensional cultural dimensions in the cultural map? And secondly, how would you like to select your team members based on these cultural dimensions, if you can choose? So do you prefer to form a team with culturally aligned or diverse teammates, and why? Okay. And I prepared the individual handouts for today's class, so you can just pass around. So please write down your answer in the handouts about question 1 and 2. Okay, the first task. So let's spend some time to work on this exercise, and you're going to need to share about your opinions towards these questions. Okay, so is there anyone want to share with us about your answers to these two questions? For instance, the first one. If you just use these cultural dimensions, how would you describe yourself in doing things, for instance? Anyone? So maybe we can discuss all together. Okay, for instance, the first one about communication, right? Would you describe yourself as a low context communicator? Yes, please raise a hand. We've got quite a lot. Okay, so the rest of you will probably high context, right? For myself, I will prefer the high context one because I think most of the Chinese culture or Taiwanese culture, we prefer indirect, this kind of communication styles. Okay. And about the second one, evaluating, is it direct negative feedback or indirect negative feedback? It essentially says that if you want to give the negative feedback to other people, how would you form the structure of your communication? Okay. So if you, the first one about direct negative feedback, please raise your hand. Okay. What about indirect negative feedback? Yeah, I think most of people would prefer indirect because we like to be treated like that, right? About the persuasion style, you are much more related to the principle first or application first. Okay. So essentially means that you try to persuade someone. Would you like to say something, for instance, general guideline in the beginning, or would you like to put some example for them in order to convince them? If you are the principle first, please raise your hand. Okay, 3. What about the application first? Okay. I think most of us would like to say some example in order to convince other people, right? I think I like it a bit like that. Okay. What about the leading style? Are you much more prefer the flag structure or hierarchical structure? If you want to lead the people. If you want the flag structure, please raise your hand. Okay. What about the hierarchical ones? Okay. So I think it depends. Many people like to, if we're working in a team, of course, we want our leader to be fair, right? So hierarchical style probably not would be preferred in most of the teamwork. But if you become the leader, probably you want to control your team, so you prefer the hierarchical style instead. So it depends. Depending on the role you've been playing in the team. Okay. What about make decision? Okay, so you made the decision by group, or you made decision by only one individual in your group. Let's say probably the team leader. If you are much more group oriented, please raise your hand. And most people prefer the way like that. What about you prefer someone make decision for you? No, no one. What about trusting? So it means that you trust people throughout the business activities versus you trust people through the probably social events. Which one? You build a trust with other people through the business activities or the work-related job, right? You build a trust through the social events. Okay. I think probably in this kind of things, you both, right? You build trust, for instance, with your friends, of course, through the social events. But if you want to build a trust with your colleague, of course, work-related would be much preferred. What about the last one? In terms of disagreements, you're much more confrontation style, or you are confrontation avoiding. You like to confront people. If you disagree with other people, you tend to say directly to them, right? What about the other style? You try to avoid saying anything about you disagree with them. Anyone? More or less you will express your disagreements, right? About the last one, scheduling. Is there a linear style or much more flexible style? If you make your schedule, how would you do? Is it linear style? Okay, so try to do everything in an organized way, right? What about a flexible style? Okay, so I think it depends. So we can say that I think the main conclusion here is that you know the cultural differences are not bounded at the national level only. Organization level or individual level, cultural differences do matter in international business activities. Okay, so especially in the multicultural team working. Okay? And speaking of the team working, you know teams are part of almost every organization right now, right? And as jobs become more complex and geographic boundaries become less important in business contexts, team behavior is more than just a sum total of each individual's acting in his or her own way. When people must work together in a team and to perform a task across national boundaries, cultural differences between team members often become more apparent, especially in a global virtual team setting. And I think because we are going to form a global budgeting as culture project very soon, and I believe it would be better to tailor this week's lecture contents more relevant to the knowledge you may need in participating in the X culture in the following weeks. Okay. So let's talk about the definitions of team. Okay. Naturally, you know that most academic institutions, for instance, university, they, especially business schools, they like to implement a team-based projects for their students in order to help their students prepare for the workplace in the future. But as you know, teams don't become teams because that is what someone calls them. Nor do the team work value by themselves ensure the team performance, right? So what is a team? Basically, a work team is a group of individuals with their shared goals and tasks, resulting in performance that is greater than the sum of the individual inputs. And because essentially when you work in teams, you and your team members are interdependent with each other. You can't finish a task without the input from your teammates. And therefore the core of a team is shared commitment, and without the groups perform as individuals, if you with the shared commitment, you will become a powerful unit of collective performance. And the best team invests tremendous time shaping the purpose they can own. And the best thing also translate their purpose into specific performance goals. So you have a series of consistent goals that be shared with the whole team members. And the members of successful teams, they usually pitching and become accountable with and to their teammates. So essentially you need to build trust as well within the team members. And their outputs and teamwork mechanisms, you have to know, even though we know about what is a team, but different types of team, and also how you form your teams can result in different team performance. Okay? And teams have become standard in the business world, and typically they can be classified into these 5 types. Most of them can be seen across different organizations, even in academic institutions as well. The first one, I think the most commonly seen, is very classic, it's called departmental teams, right? They have been around for a very long time. As a department team, individual relates to their specialty or focus on their expertise, with everyone working forward achieving goals online in the company's mission statements. So some companies usually work for department teams around their organization. For instance, they develop the teams in the tech startup, or maybe you can often see the sales team in the marketing agencies. And departmental teams usually are permanent, and they are typically work on ongoing projects that in line with the organizational goals. And the second one is called problem-solving teams. Okay. These type of teams, they are usually temporary, and they focus on solving very specific issues. And their guidelines were set in place and plans were formed, and the task force and committee were disbanded. So once they accomplish the certain task, they will disband it. Okay, so this is a temporary team setting. For example, after the financial crisis in 2008, several organization task force teams and even government committees, they were created to come up with the solutions in order to help the company climb out of steep recessions. Okay. And the third type is called self-managed team. These type of teams, they are the most empowered ones. Because they have been given power, as a team members given power to make very certain decisions for your company. And each team member brings a certain skill set to the table and make decisions for the whole organization. And maybe they will complete a given task, or maybe they will deliver a service for the customer, depending on the objective of the team formats. And companies that implement the self-managed teams say their employees tend to feel more ownership of the projects. Okay. And the next type is cross-functional teams. I think it's often been seen, especially in multinational corporation. It means that team members, they are basically from the same hierarchical level within the organization, but they are from different work areas with different professions. They're coming together to accomplish a task. Okay. And in most business settings, cross-functional team members collaborate with other departments to tackle certain projects for the company. For instance, maybe a new product launch for the company, or the service quality improvement. This kind of time often can be heard as a quality circle in the organization. And in these situations, communication between different departments is very critical in order to complete the task. Okay. And the final thing, I think, you're going to experience that in the next few weeks about virtual teams. Okay. Virtual team refers to teams that use information technology to tie together physically dispersed members in order to achieve a common goal. And a virtual team can be any type of team that communicates digitally rather than in person. Okay. And easier communication tool, they will allow managers to build team based on each member's strengths and weaknesses rather than their geographic locations. Okay. And usually company form this kind of team because they try to tie up their employees within different subsidiaries around the world. Okay. And there's an economic survey say that around 90% of corporate leaders, they feel today's problems are very complex to solve. So they require teams to help them to come up with effective solutions. And these leaders believe that collaboration can fuel creative thinking and problem solving, which are very critical to positive business outcomes. So that's why in many business organizations like to form a team in order to accomplish a task. But how can managers know that when the team options become sensible and what they can do to ensure the team's success? Then it comes to the very useful model. This model is identified by researchers that they identify several factors contributing to team effectiveness. Okay. And generally, we can organize the key components of effective teams into the categories of independent variable, for instance, the context variable, compositions, and process variable. And the major dependent variable in the model obviously is the team effectiveness. Let's talk about dependent variable first. How can you measure effectiveness of a team? Okay. Typically in the research, you can use the three variables. Okay. So probably you can use the team productivity. It can be calculated by how you perform the statistics. And also the managers, their own ratings about their members. And also, of course, the member satisfaction within the team. Okay. And while using this model to create the effective team, I think you need to bear in mind two points. The first one is you need to know that teams differ in forms and types, as we explained in the previous slide. And secondly, this model assumes teamwork as being preferable to individual work. Okay, so if an individual can do the job alone better than their teamwork, and the model becomes useless for the obvious reason. Okay, so the model only useful if you believe teamwork can bring much benefits more than just individual work. And there are four contextual variables in the first categories of the variable you can see from the slides. So as you know teams are part of a large organization system, right? So every work team relies on resource outside the group to sustain it. And these resources could be tangible and intangible ones. I think we learned about this from the other courses. And the lack of resources directly reduce the ability of the team to perform the job effectively and to achieve the goals. And of course, leadership styles and structures are critical in determining the effectiveness of the teamwork. And we will expand the discussion on leadership next week. Okay? And the very often individuals in the company may belong to different work teams, right? For instance, an employee may be the marketing officer in the marketing department, but he or she also supports the work team across the department and cross-functional projects for the organization. But how would you evaluate his or her performance between different work teams? Okay, so performance evaluation and reward systems become important to deal with such issues in organizations. So that could be a critical topic for the human resource management. How would you evaluate the employees' performance given that they are in different types of teams? Okay? And among all these contextual factors, I think climate of trust is most critical because it's comparatively difficult to examine how much trust developed in a team. And not to mention examine how trustworthy of your team members, isn't it? So I think we'll agree that interpersonal trust among team members, they will facilitate the cooperation, decreases the need to monitor each other's behaviors, and bounce members around the belief that the other team members won't take advantage of them. Okay? And team members are more likely to take the risks and expose uncertainty when they believe they can trust others within their team. And development trust is critical in the work situations, especially in multicultural teams, where differences in communications and interaction may lead to misunderstandings, leading to distrust between the team members. So here comes a very interesting question for you to think about. That are there cultural differences in how much people trust others in general? Yes or no? I think the answer is obviously yes, right? Let's look at the statistics here. Okay. So many studies have shown the overall level of trust differ across cultures. Okay. For example, in a study of global value survey, they said that Germans they have been found to be less trusting of people from other countries. Is it true? And Japanese they have been found to be more trusting of American counterparts than the other way around. Okay, so it's kind of comparative sense. So they trust their American partners, but the American partners don't trust Japanese partners. Okay. And also it's interesting to know that, for instance, Chinese Americans, they tend to trust each other equally. Okay, so when interacting with others from different cultures, whether in a formal team setting or not, it seems that what drives you to trust your team members may differ from what drives your team members to trust you. Okay? And obviously recognizing these differences can help to facilitate higher level of trust. So there's a group of researchers in the IT field that actually delve into the topic like that. With different cultural backgrounds, how would you trust people from different cultural backgrounds and the other way around? Okay. And if you are interested, of course, you look at the World Value Survey by yourself. It's a free data, free access, okay, over the internet. And a comparison of trust attitudes from the World Value Survey suggests there's a very large, time persistent, and cross-country heterogeneities. Okay. This map shows a global picture of cross-cultural differences in trust levels, and estimates correspond to the latest available data published in 2004. Once again, heterogeneity stands out. As you can see, across different world regions, they have different colors to give you ideas how much level of trust they build within the country and towards the other different cultural backgrounds. Okay. And I think I highlighted here is that the countries such as Norway, Sweden, and Finland, Scandinavian countries, they say more than 16% of the respondents there think that people can be trusted. Okay. And in the other extreme, I think in a country such as Colombia, Brazil, and Peru, less than 10% of respondents think that they can be trusted. I think that makes sense, right? And notice that even in some relatively homogeneous regions such as Western Europe, there are some notable differences. For instance, I think there's a twofold difference between France and neighboring country Germany. Okay, and I don't know if you agree with the survey results. I think because we've got some students from European countries, right? Do you believe that within the different nations, you've got different trust attitude towards each other? For instance, give you a question like that. Do you trust the police in your country? Yes, right? But you laugh. Do you trust the police in your country? No. What about Taiwan? Yes, half, okay. What about Australia? Yes, in some countries they think that police are distrust, right? They are not worthy of your trust, but in some countries, of course, you have very good legal or political systems, you believe that police can be trusted. Okay, so that's a simple question that we throw into the survey. I think that's an interesting one. Okay, and let's move on to the next categories of the variable. There would be team composition. Okay, which include the factors that relate to how teams should be staffed. Okay, so for instance, the ability and the personality of the team members, and allocation of the roles, diversity, size of the firm, and member preferences for teamwork. And among all of these factors, I think the allocation of roles is most relevant to your teamwork experience, isn't it? Teams have different needs, so the members that should be selected to ensure all the various roles are filled. And this is also relating to diversity across team members. So researchers, again, in the field, they have identified 9 potential team roles, as you can see from the slide. So the successful work team have selected people to play all these roles based on their skill set and preferences, of course. And to increase the likelihood team members will work well together, managers and leaders of the team, they probably need to understand the individual strengths of each team members and they can bring to the team. And select the team members with their strengths in mind, of course, and allocate the work assignment that fit with the members' preferences. Okay. So which role do you usually play in a team? You can see there are 9 teams, right? Probably there are some overlapping roles you usually will play in a team. Anyone like to share? You tend to be an advisor or controller. For instance, you always be a control freak to control everything in your teamwork. Or you are essentially a very good creator in your team. Again, from the model here, we said that depending on different teams you've been formed and different tasks, probably you play different roles in a team, right? And depending on the objective of the teamwork, if it's a work-related job, of course, you try to control everything in a sense. But if it's a kind of the brainstorming teamwork, of course, creation is most effective, the most important factor here. Okay. And the final category related to the team effectiveness include the process variable, such as the member commitment to the common purpose, establishment of specific team goals, team efficacy, management level of conflict. I would say sometimes conflict don't mean a negative thing. It's management level conflict could be a very creative way to form a team, and try to minimize the social loafing. Okay, the importance of this factor will be more evident in larger team setting or in teams that are highly interdependent. But why? Let's take some the social loafing, for example. Okay, social loafing is the phenomena of people exerting less effort to achieve a goal when they work in group than when they work alone. Okay, so for instance, when you are collaborating with others, for instance, 2 people in a team, so you're a team of 3 people, and you very often can find that team performance of 3 people doesn't necessarily add up to 3, right? And that's always a free rider issue in teams. Okay, so I believe you'll have experience though encountering free riders in your teamwork, right? So let's take an exercise here by the mini case study, which is written by myself. So I uploaded onto the NTO core. I think the case title is called Tongta in Teams. Essentially means that in a teamwork, if someone is not contributing at all, what would you do? Okay. And you can write down your answer in the individual handout as well. So let's spend some time on that, probably 10 minutes, and we're gonna share your tactical strategy to stimulate your teamwork, team members' contribution. I think it's 10 o'clock, so let's take a break, okay, and I'll come back to continue the case.
Yeah, Yeah, we met in ICL last year, and we've been friends ever since. So I think me and Kevin can bring up more because we're at both of us. So Kevin is for like, we're all that's like, that's my, one of my groups. Like, I mean, I miss so many kids like that. She was like, so he was my girl. Okay. Where is she from? She's from yes. UK. So she was here for the worry. So it was sad. But I saw her over the summer. So I was in the UK. I went to a concert and so hey, went to London. It was a little crazy. Yeah, like some art. Very scattered. I had to buy my points so I would just from all that much for one person in 2 hours. I went to see Mono. He's an African artist. He's my favorite artist. So I got up to see him and I was like, I don't care what he is, I'm gonna go see him. So he's probably having to live in like probably a couple of months. I'm not thinking about that. So I was like, this is probably the last time I see him before after. So I was like, well, wherever you're going, I'm going. I'll be there. So, but I wasn't the only person that wasn't from Europe there. So I didn't know that. I think it was normal for people to have bars.
Especially for
Crossover clothes. Yeah. No, I think I've told you this, but I work in and I met this guy, like, normally then we have a concert hall very close to his house, so we're always fully booked when we went to the event. Yes. And the Rolling Stones, and we were fully booked. And one of the guys was like, yeah, I actually saw 10 days ago, but I realized, like, it's not what they are getting old. So who knows how much longer they can do this? So I'd rather just like keep on watching as many shows as I can before they die. And I'm like, okay, well
Next tour, I'm about to be
before he runs out of time.
I'm so serious. That's the one thing. I will not buy coffee at the store, right? I will like be like, no, I'm not going to spend money. Will I drop $1,000 to a concert? Absolutely. I will spend money like the singer and the concerts. 3 of them I traveled across without paying before. So I went to Canada. It's opposite sides. Like I live in Boston, so it's like on the east side. I went to Vancouver. That's on the other side, like the continent. So I went there to WT, and then I went to Phoenix, which is also the other side. To see my ex, and then I was to Toronto, and then drove to New Jersey. It's like a 5-hour drive for the other one, so it's not that bad. But that's my favorite thing. I love traveling and I love mountains. I'm so excited.
And for me, it's like that, like general travel. I would pay a lot of money just to go, like, or something. But I get for this one, I think that I'm not been like super. For me, it's like I love to go to concerts, but I'm not going to be the one, like I'm not going to be the product leader. Oh, let's go to this concert. But as soon as someone asks, like, do you want to go? Then I'm like, yes, I'll join.
I go by myself.
Yeah, but it depends, for me, it depends on the artist. But Adam, definitely like product leader of that. Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm going to die. I told you.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, everyone's having exactly. No, I literally. Do you guys have a close contact impression? Like when you finish, and you're just like, oh, can I go to another one? Where's the next one? I also like remind you.
So definitely it's one of my projects goes like us. The long-term impact.
And also, I've been to like festivals before, not that many, and it hasn't really been much of an experience before. And this summer, I actually went to.
When you sit you met me, yeah, we come to
Yeah.
you went to the really fun.
You want to see it? I've wanted to see her, but then COVID happened. I was gonna go. I was in Europe. I was in Europe when she was on tour, and then COVID happened. I got sent home. So it was a day. Then I came here when she was in the US. So I was like, yeah.
I think, yeah, we weren't really supposed to. Honestly, we skipped the line somehow. I don't know how, but like, we didn't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, very yeah.
Exactly. That's why we
But I would say like this is practical. I really like what you're saying. Like I listen to you amazing music, but at the same time there's few artists that like go up to the country to like only see that person. I have a few like that I want to see in my life, but I like that setting because it's like I said this is someone that's really big in Sweden, and then you go to the next page, and then it's like hello, and then you go like it's a perfect mix of like people that I listen to normally and not, and then I find new artists. Yeah, and it's just that I never say what to me with this kind of feeling because then that whole thing is just a vibe.
Yeah. I've never been to this.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Okay, so let's continue the lecture on the discussion of the 3 questions. So the first one is that, I don't know if you had experience of that, recall a time when you fall to sleep during a team meeting. Okay, so what were the reason for your silence? Anyone would share? Yes, please.
So I can share primary reasons when I really feel like the gap in my life because I never included in the conversation or in the team, and therefore then I feel like my thoughts they won't be valued. So then I get like
Yeah, it's pretty much the similar situation in the case, right? It doesn't mean that you lack of preparation for the meeting. Of course you did, but during the meeting that you feel that you may contribute something that will be judged by other people as you are actually not contributing at all. So instead of saying nonsense, you just keep quiet, right? What else? Any other people? Yes?
For me, it's more I feel that what's already been stated
Mhm.
is with more knowledge than what I have. So even though I have another way of looking at the problem or whatever we're discussing, if I feel like, well, they have more knowledge and it's already stated, then I'm not gonna
Repeat again, right? Yes, yes.
I think like sometimes it's also a public relationship like
Mhm.
when we are talking with like experts and like they're asking our opinions obviously because we're juniors and like we don't have sometimes this topic and that's why they want to do like our opinion. That might be kind of hard to express ourselves because like we don't have some knowledge of course and these people like they might be afraid to say something that's like not like out of place so yes
Yeah, it's pretty similar situation here. You think that other people have more knowledge about you than you, right? And maybe like in the case that this is someone asks you the question, obviously he or she is much more knowledgeable than you. Right? So you're so afraid that you're saying something that probably the other person would think that it's not make sense. Okay. Any other? Yes.
For me, it's disagreeing with my other team members
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to offend anyone or you can feel like your contribution is not valuable even though you disagree with them. So
Mhm.
sometimes I just want to.
Yeah, you're afraid of disagreements with other people, right? Anything? Yes.
I think in most Asian cultures, we were taught,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when a conversation is going on, probably when you start, you want to ask questions, so you want to contribute something, or they pause the topic, right? I think yes.
I've had a bunch of meetings where you're making a big decision and there's clearly like politics involved and people don't want to make the best decision, but the best decision for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it doesn't affect me, and I know like I will leave this company in a month anyway or something. Have fun, guys.
Yeah, that's a practical reason, right? What about the second question? Okay, so beyond the tips provided in the case, can you think about a strategy that can help the situation like that? Because obviously in the last paragraph, right, one professor said something about the suggestions. Anything else you want to share? Yes.
I was working with a company where we had a one-word opener
Mm-hmm.
meeting. So everyone just quick round, drop one word about his current state, how he's feeling, something about his day. And my feeling was when this barrier of silence was overcome by everyone, the tendency of participation was much higher.
Mm-hmm.
And it really affected the meeting.
Yeah, that's a good strategy, right? It's kind of an icebreaker in the meeting, right? Yes.
I think it's very helpful to, one, stop people from dominating the conversation, and two, following up people directly.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a little intimidating at first, but I find like when you say like, hey, I haven't heard anything from you today, do you have anything to add? Or what are your thoughts on it? And avoid yes or no questions,
Mm-hmm.
because then people are just like, oh no. Like, you have to let them call out, but then also people dominate the conversation. So you have to be like, hey, thanks for sharing, but we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak up and share their thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really helpful for not only like introverts and extroverts, but also like different cultures where people won't speak up unless they're asked directly.
So that's a very good strategy that you throwing question to them in saying yes or no. No, they elaborate. They need to elaborate the question, right? What else? What could be the other solutions to the situation like that? Yes.
This is again more focused on decision making, and only if it's bigger decisions, but there's been research done on this type of stuff, what to do. And there's good mathematical models and numerical models where you give everybody input into the criteria you want to have, and then they judge it themselves and decide numbers, and you take everybody's input and reach a final score, which takes a lot of the dominating factors out of it, and the boss will have the same input as somebody else, so you might be able to scale this input up to 5 times as much, but still everybody has input, every expert can make his decisions, and then you can see what the team is doing from that.
Yeah, it's a very good strategy for the decision, but although it takes time. Right?
Yeah, this is only for like
if you have time.
few millions or something. But
Yeah, again, I agree with that. Anything else? Yes, please. But I think that even in a formal meeting, some people will just don't like to talk, right? Maybe they feel uncomfortable about a formal meeting. They are not socialized at all. Yes.
I think this works especially with virtual meetings,
Mm-hmm.
but providing alternative ways for people to share and give feedback. So that could look like sending out an agenda before the meeting and asking for people to like fill out their thoughts,
Mhm.
and then using that annotated version during the meeting. Or like, hey, use the chat function if you have something to say, and then you can use the chat and people might be more willing to share. But really just carving out that space for people to share in a variety of ways, and that way you can still get their opinions and still respect that some people maybe just don't like to talk in public.
Yeah, but they can use other communication tool to say things they want to say, right? What about the third questions? So imagine now you're leading the team, right? Notice that someone in your team is not contributing. What could be the specific step? I think we already shared about this in response to the second question as well, right? But only if you are the leader, of course, you can use your power to ask the people to answer your questions, or maybe to contribute something, to force them to say something. But again, it's one of the strategy. Of course, you can be more consulting styles to ask them to join the conversation you created as well. Okay, so these are the few steps in communications. Okay, we can move on to the topic we're going to talk about today. It's about communication. Okay, so you know communication is crucial, and you know what the communication is. So I don't think I need to define what communication for you. But you have to know that communication includes both the transfer and understanding of the meaning. Okay, this is very important because without a proper understanding of the meaning, given that you've been transferred all you have to the recipient of the message, you still can't guarantee that a communication outcome will go as well as you intended. Okay, so let's take example of the fisherman. I think I already studied in the slides. Suppose now you're a fisherman on a boat and you finally catch a fish after a while, and you say to the fish that, "What a beautiful day. Okay, how's the condition in the water?" Okay, and the fish reply, suppose that he can reply to you, okay, and he said, "What's the water?" Okay. So the problem is that people usually communicate with other people based on too many presumptions, and that often causes misunderstandings and misinterpretation as well. And you know that a fish spends a whole life in the water, and it is impossible for you to know there's another space. So obviously, that's a miscommunication example for your information. So you know that syntactical communication requires both transfer and understanding of the meaning, and finding the common ground between you and your audience if you're the communicator. I think the most important thing throughout the communication process. And in the group organization, communication serves four functions, as you can see on the slide. The first one is that communication acts to control individuals' behavior in a group or organization in several ways. For instance, an organization that may have the authority and have hierarchy or formal guidelines that employees are required to follow. So when employees communicate job-related tasks, maybe they follow a job description or comply with the company policy, communication performs a control function all of the situation. And then secondly, communication fosters motivation by clarifying to employees what they must do and how well they are doing it and how they can improve their performance. Okay? And this is quite a sensible function of communication in organization. I think even myself use a lot of written feedback, formal written feedback form for students once they've done an assignment. Okay? I think it's a good way to motivate students' learning. Okay? And next one, communication within a group organization is a fundamental mechanism by which employees express their emotions, okay? Such as the satisfaction or maybe frustration in their work. And people usually perceive a group as a social community in which they can interact with other people to feel their various social needs. So communication takes place in organization perform very much the similar work, the kind of the social needs, they're providing for the emotional expression of feeling for the employees. So we can therefore see, for instance, some top management, for instance, CEO or president of the company, they usually have very nice personality, they will cracking jokes, will be chatting around with their employees all the time in order to express their emotions. And often you can see that a group of employees, maybe they're gossiping about their colleagues in order to express their emotion as well. Okay. And the final function of communications is facilitate decision making by offering the information and transmitting the data needed to identify and evaluate choices and strategy for the organization. So especially in the higher level of the organization, say the board meeting, regular board meeting of a company, usually they will make decisions on whether the firm should diversify its business or not. Okay, so this is a very informal way to transmit the information for decision making. And so the takeaway here is that in order to perform effective communication within the organization, groups organization need to maintain certain level of control over their members, stimulate and motivate members to perform the intended work, allow the emotional expression, and also make decision choices based on needed information. Okay? But how does the communication works? Okay? So how a piece of message information is delivered from the sender to receiver during the communication process. So this is the very famous model developed by two mathematicians, named Shannon and Weaver, back in 1949. The model shows how communication takes place between the sender and the receiver, and it is made of 8 phases. So basically, the sender initiates a message by encoding a thought, right? And the message is the actual physical product from the source. And that channel is the medium through which the message travels. For instance, you may use mobile phones or maybe to communicate with others, or you use emails, much more formal way, depending on the purpose of your communication, right? And the receiver obviously is the individual to whom the message is directed to, and who must first translate the symbols into the understanding form. So this is the decoding of the message. And the final link in a communication process is the feedback, right? Feedback is the check upon how successful we have been in transmitting our message as originally intended. And it determines whether understanding has been achieved. And as you know, that communication must include both the transfer and understanding of the meaning. Okay. Along the communication process, you can see noises stand in the middle. Okay. So noises represents the communication barrier that damage the clarity of the message that have been transferred. But what could be the noises, or what could be the communication barriers in process? So let's watch the video. I don't know if you watched the video, The Big Bang Theory, the American drama. And the video tells you there's a lot of communication barriers between the characters.
First it was PlayStation, aka PS1, then it's PS2, PS3, and now PS4. And that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox, there'd be Xbox 2. But no. Next came Xbox 360. And now, after 360, comes Xbox One. Why one? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put into naming it. Can you get the butter, please? Yeah, however, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard. Then get the other one. Pass the butter. Hang on. I don't feel like you're taking this dilemma seriously. Fine, Sheldon. You have my undivided attention. Okay, now, the PS4 is more angular and sleek-looking. No way! It's true. But the larger size of the Xbox One may keep it from overheating. You wouldn't want your gaming system to overheat? No, see, well, you absolutely would not. And furthermore, the Xbox One now comes with a Kinect included. Included? Yes. Not sold separately. Although the PS4 uses cool new GDDR5 RAM, while the Xbox One is still using the conventional DDR3 memory. Why would they still be using DDR3? Are they nuts? See, that's what I thought. But then they go and throw in an ES RAM buffer. Oh, wait a second. Who's that? The Xbox. You're kidding. No, I am not. And this ES RAM buffer should totally bridge the 100 gigabit per second bandwidth gap between the two RAM types. This is a nightmare. How will you ever make a decision? See, I don't know. What should I do? Please pass the butter.
Okay, you see several communication barriers in between, right? So it seems that the female character Amy in the video, given her impatience during the communications, she still tried to engage in other people's topic by filtering approach. Okay, what does it mean? It means that he purposely manipulates information so it will be seen as more favorable to hear by the receiver. Okay, called filtering. And basically, if you do filtering in communication, you say something that is only interesting by the other people. Okay. And Sheldon, on the other hand, that is the male character, thinks that he used the selective perception approach during the communication process because he seemed to be very selective to see and hear Amy's reaction based on his own perception. Okay, selectively disregard the needs by Amy to pass the butter, right? And other than the filtering the selective perception, there are several barriers that can hinder the effective communication as well. The first one is called information overload. Okay, it occurs when the information we have to work with exceeds our processing capacity. Okay, I think it happens a lot when you browse the things online, and this explains our tendency to slack out, ignore, or pass over, forget information. Okay, and or maybe we'll just put it aside until the overload information is over. Okay, people usually do that. This results in lost information and less effective communication for sure. And the next one is called emotions. Emotions also influence how people receive the message, right? And people in their negative moods, they are more likely to scrutinize the message in greater details. Okay? But with those in positive moods, they tend to accept communication at face value, right? So Extreme emotions such as depression are also more likely to hinder the effective communication for sure. So what it means is that if you are happy, you probably will learn more from me than you are unhappy. Okay, in a case like that. And the next one is the language. Very often the sender in the communication process tend to incorrectly assume the words and terms they use mean the same to the receiver at the same time. But even when with communication the same language, I think I provided the same example last time, about the literal meaning and real meaning about across different culture in terms of the English, right? And other than cultural differences, what could be the cause of language barrier in the communication process? I think different contexts, they can probably will be the two biggest factors that influence the language barrier in communication. For example, elder people, they may not understand the new words created by the younger generation, right? And especially over the internet. And not to mention the languages and characters that are being used online across different generations. Okay? And I think it's rather easy to ignore silence or lack of communication because it is defined by the absence of communication or information. But we have discussed over these issues in earlier case studies, so we know lack of communication is unpleasant in team working. And in fact, using silence and withholding communication are very common and problematic, especially in a teamwork or throughout an organization. Imagine that if you are in a group discussion and there are always silent members with no contribution, in the case, you learn nothing from your team members, and the discussion results will not be positive as well. Okay. And next is that there's an estimate of 5 to 20%, up to 20% of the population, they actually suffer from comprehension apprehension. So they experience tension or anxiety in oral or written communication as well. They may find it difficult to talk with other people face to face directly. And this could be one of the communication barriers as well. So sometimes maybe they have the problems with that. And the final barrier to effective communication is misinterpretation of the information. We just simply say lying. Okay? And due to the problem of information asymmetry, I think it's rather difficult for us to detect the lying behaviors. And the frequency of lying and the difficulties in detecting liars make that is essentially a very strong barrier to effective communication, especially in business contexts. Okay? And in addition to these barriers, you see on the slide, is there any other barriers in communication not listed in the slide? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe, yeah, the contents of the message, right? The different levels of knowledge you have. What else? Yes? Yes, the body language is the verbal interaction, right? That could be the barrier for effective communication as well, such as the improper gestures we talked about last time, the facial expressions, and also the postures and the physical distance between the sender and the receiver can cause another problems as well. And I think compared with the facial expression of communicating anger, sadness, fear, and happiness, they may consider to be the same across universal. I think gestures and some body languages, and they are not so universal at all. Okay? And we had a discussion about that last time. I want to give you another extra example because I encountered that when I traveled in India, is that the meaning of the nodding your heads or shaking your heads. If you ask the Indian, I don't know, maybe they have a different ways of shaking their heads to say yes, right? Yeah, but I do that a lot. Okay, you say something, have you eaten your dinner? Yeah. I don't know what does it mean. It actually means yes in some of the countries, right? So that's another body language in the hinder effective communication. Okay. So you've understood a list of barriers to effective communication between individuals. But when we level up discussion into organization or into at a national level, effective communication will be even harder to achieve, especially in the context of international business. But why is that? You know about that. Obviously, managerial communication is so different from other kinds of communication in business settings. In business and management context, such as international business, the most brilliant message in the world will do you no good unless you achieve your desired outcome. It means that you always say something, you have the intention, you have the objective you want to achieve. Okay? If you say something useless during the communication with your business partner, it would, of course, they will do you no good. Okay, and so that's the first reason. The second reason is that obviously cross-border collaboration or negotiation usually involve a lot of complexity and puzzles resulting from the cultural differences or spatial differences, geographic area, and also time differences as well. Okay. So that's why strategic communication is the key to success in cross-cultural contexts. Okay? But how can we achieve the strategic communication? Okay, this is a model, and another model developed by two scholars, Monter and Hamilton, in their best-selling book called Guide to Managerial Communication. Okay? And also uploaded one of their book chapters onto your core, so you can have a look on that. And in their model, the author argues that instead of thinking communication as a straight line from the sender to the receiver, I think visualizing communication as a circle, as you can see in the slide, is a better way to achieve the desired communication outcome. Okay. So strategic communication is based on 5 interactive variables, including communicator strategy, audience strategy, message strategy, channel choice strategy, of course, and the culture. And these variables, they may affect one another. For instance, your communicator style may be different because of different audience you encounter, right? And they place culture in the middle because culture influences all of these strategies throughout the communication process. Okay. I think let's quickly go through this individual strategy in more details and discuss how culture affects managerial communication by the end. The first one is about communication strategy. Basically, it's concerned with the factors involving you, the communicator. So regardless whether you are speaking or writing, your communication strategy should include 3 elements, including objective, style, and also credibility. Okay. A strategic or good communicator who receives the desired response or outcomes through communication process. And to examine the outcome, you must have your thoughts from the general to the specific. So general objective is concerned with the overall goal which your communication will unfold. And actions objective is the breakdown of your general goals, and it includes a series of action plans to achieve the desired outcome. And the communication objective focuses on the results you hope to achieve from a single communication efforts. Okay. For example, you may have the general objective to increase the number of female employees in your company. Okay. And your action objective would be the exact number of female employees you want to hire, okay, in a specific timeline. And the communication objective would be the ways you conducted the job interviews and the results of the interviews with the female employees. Okay, so these are just the different levels of objective usually you will go through in the communication strategy. And the second question, you may want to consider a communicator strategy regarding to the communication style. Okay. So as you can see in the slide, there are 4 types of communication, including the tell, sell, consult, and join. So in the tell style, you are informing or explaining something to your audience. So you want your audience to understand something you already know. Okay? And in a sell style, obviously you are persuading or advocating. You want your audience to change their thinking or their behaviors as a result of a selling technique. And I don't know, have you ever experienced of being persuaded by a salesperson to buy something useless? Yes. Is how they persuade you, right? So, do you often purchase more items than you actually need just because you saw there's a promotion campaign or buy one get one free? No? Yes, I do that a lot, okay. And I purchase a bulk of items and I don't need that. I don't know why. That's the selling technique in communication, okay. And on the other hand, the consult style is somewhat collaborative, and the join style is even more collaborative, just as brainstorming. I'll give you some examples. So when you use the tell and sell style to do communication, you usually have sufficient information to share with your audience, but you don't need to hear others' opinion, just tell them something you know, okay? But when you use the consult and join style instead to do communication, you don't have sufficient information at all. You want to understand others' inputs, okay, and want to involve your audience to gain their agreements. It's depending upon whether or not you have enough information to share. And in the ongoing communication process, you may need to use the combination of different styles. Okay, so maybe you join style to brainstorm some ideas, and you consult to choose one of these ideas and sell to persuade your boss or your supervisor to adopt this particular ideas you generated, and tell to write up ideas once it become company policy. Okay, different types of styles along with the process. And you have to know that these different communication styles are dependent on the communicator objective you want to achieve. Okay, so reflect upon the first step about objective. And the final factor affecting communicator strategy is the credibility. Okay, and there are two types of credibility of a communicator: initial credibility and acquired credibility. Initial credibility means that your audience perception of you before you even begin to communicate with them. And so your initial credibility then may stem from their perception of who you are, or what you represent, and how you have related to them previously. Okay? And acquired credibility, by contrast, refers to your audience perception of you as a result of what you've been written or said to them. Okay? And even your audience knows nothing about you in advance, your good ideas and your persuasive writing or selling technique, they will help you to earn credibility as well. So there are 5 dimensions of factors that affect your credibility, as you can see on the slide. For instance, rank, right? We'll talk about that. In the communication process, ranking or hierarchical structure within the group organization can be the barrier for the communications. Rank is basically the relative hierarchical power between the communicator and the audience. Okay, so you may stress initial credibility by emphasizing your title or rank before starting to communicating with others. Many people do so. For instance, usually you will hear in the presentation of speech by, for instance, top management of a company, they were starting to stress their rank at the company, their backgrounds, their titles, right, in order to show their credibility in the beginning. And you also can increase the acquired credibility by associating yourself with or citing the high-ranking person within the group. Such as often if you want to find a job, you will ask a reference letter from your previous employer or maybe your supervisors in university, right? This is how you attain the acquired credibility throughout the process. Okay, and the second one is goodwill. Goodwill represents personal relationship or your track records, right? So this states your initial credibility because people see you from your past experience. So goodwill also associated with how trustworthy of you in relation to other people. Okay, and to enhance your acquired credibility, you may try to engage your audience benefits by explaining what's in it for them during a negotiation process, offering a balanced viewpoints, try not to use your stereotypes towards each other, and recognizing there is a potential conflict of interest to the audience. Okay? This is how you build up your trust to increase your goodwill. And if you have expertise, then you can just share your expert understanding or explain how you gain such knowledge or expertise to earn your credibility, for sure. I think that's an easy one. And image, apparently, is how you look like to other people, right? And you may show your attributes that audience find attractive to gain your credibility as well. Okay. Whether or not you have shared value, ideas, problems, or need with the audience, I think it's a key to earn credibility by common grounds. Okay. And if you have no idea about the audience perception and backgrounds, you may try to ask the audience about their thoughts of certain questions, and you can understand how to establish the common ground by sharing similar ideas with them. And sometimes you have no idea about your audience in advance. So throwing some questions to your audience in the beginning in order to find what could be the similar ideas you can share with each other, I think is a key to earn your credibility. And the second part of the strategic communication model is concerned with the audience. Okay? So there's a very famous saying, I think, by a very famous management guru called Peter Drucker. He said that communications take place in the mind of the listeners, not of the speakers. Okay, so that's highlighting the importance of audience in the communication process. So the more you learn about your audience, for instance, who they are, and what they know, and what they feel, and how they can be persuaded, the more likely you will achieve your desired outcome through the communication process. Okay. To start off on the first question, who are your audience? Okay. This question sounds like very easy one, but in the business world, this question is often very complex. Okay? You will need to think about all the possible audience throughout the communication process. For instance, you may be negotiating with the business partner in terms of the price on the raw material supplies over the phone. But the person you contact with is usually not the one who can make the final decision. Okay? And maybe his or her supervisor is the person who made the final decision for you, but you are not contacted with them, you are not communicating with them. So they are so-called hidden audience throughout your communication process. And basically there are three types of possible audience in a multi-channel communication. The first one is the primary audience. Obviously they are the one who actually receive your message directly, right? But when audience is unknown, you may want to find out their backgrounds, such as their age, their education level, the countries or regions, etc. And you may also want to know their preferences in the channel choices. For instance, do they prefer contacting via emails or over the phones or maybe face-to-face? Okay? It's very crucial to understand your audience before you start communicating with them. That's the primary audience who receive the message directly. And the secondary audience, I think you'll never overlook the people who will receive your message indirectly. Okay? For example, you may email the person with some message and the email could be forwarded to unknown people who then become your secondary audience throughout the process. Or you may want to get in touch with the client in a top management level, but his or her assistant block your message quite often, right? So you should deal with your secondary audience carefully in order to ensure the message has been delivered as intended. And the third type is called influencer, the key influencers. Usually one or more audience members have more control or power over the outcome of the communication process. So this includes the decision makers, opinion leaders, or maybe the gatekeepers. So for example, if your supervisor always approves your slides or maybe your memos before you meet with the clients, he or she may be just as important as your primary audience because they are kind of a gatekeeper throughout the communication process. Yes? Mm-hmm.
Those people who are in your company, is it primary audience or secondary?
I think that would be the secondary audience because you are not actually talk something directly to them. You just copy them in the emails. They just be informed of your conversation through the primary audience, right? But again, you have to think carefully about who are going to copy within your emails because they saw the message. You will see the message, right? And the second question in the audience strategy you may want to consider is what your audience know and expect, right? Before you decide what to tell them, you also need to think about what your audience already knew, okay? And here are some guidelines in communication from the book, okay? So sometimes people have worked on their project for quite a long time, and they may know so much more than even a well-informed audience. So that they forgot to share the necessary information or background knowledge in the communication process. This happens a lot, especially for PhD students, right? They've been working on their thesis in a specialized area for several years. And very often when they try to introduce their research to non-academics, no one will understand because they lack information about the background knowledge, okay? I think it's ironic to note that knowing too much could be a problem in communication as well, okay? And sometimes you may need to communicate with the audience with the mixed backgrounds. Okay, so different in their age, education, occupation, gender, maybe different culture as well. So in this regard, finding a common ground between you and your audience is the key. I think I keep emphasizing about this. And you need to be flexible to adjust your communication strategy at all time. Okay? And very often people ignore logistic issues to communication. For instance, how long should your presentation or documents be? Okay, and what technology is available or needed to present your ideas, or even the dressing styles. Okay, so you obviously can't wear your Havaiana slippers to attend a formal conference, right? So it's about logistic issue. Okay, and finally, you need to pay attention to people and help with the non-native speaker in your audience, especially in cross-cultural contexts. You need to avoid sarcasm, okay, and be careful with the humor, sense of humor, and adjust your delivery if your audience can't fully understand your communication contents. It's related to cross-cultural communication as well. And there are also very important questions you need to keep in mind by observing the feeling of your audience. For instance, what emotions do they hate right now? And how interested are they in your message, right? And what is their probable bias, okay? Positive or negative towards the topic you are delivering? Is the desired action easy or difficult for them? Okay, and so I think keeping an eye contact with the audience is very helpful to observe their emotions and during communication process. Okay, so even though it's a one-on-one conversation, it's keeping eye contact with the person, or maybe you are in an interview, keeping eye contact with the interviewer, I think is the key. Okay, and having understood your audience feeling, you now have a more complete picture of persuasion of your audience, right? So you may think about how you can be most persuasive by emphasizing your audience benefits throughout the process, drawing on your own credibility and structuring the way you organize your message. Okay? So let's take an example here that if you are in a job interview, how would you persuade a potential employer to get an offer? I think that's the very practical question here, how you persuade the employer during the interview process. For instance, in a job interview, you may want to persuade your potential employer that what you can contribute to the firm by engaging your audience benefits in the first place, right? And then introducing your qualities or maybe your backgrounds that fit in the job description and organizational culture, if you could, and in order to draw your credibility. And finally, you may structure your message in a way, for instance, in a very structured way or systematic way, or maybe innovative way, depending on the organizational culture, in order to get his or her attention during the interview process as well. I don't know if you heard about an interview technique called STAR technique, STAR. Anyone heard about this? Throughout the interview, especially it's very useful when you are answering the behavioral-based questions. For instance, you often be heard about an interviewer ask you a question like, can you give me an example that you faced the difficulties, how you resolve that throughout the process? This is kind of behavioral-based question being asked in the interview, right? So let's watch the video, very practical one. And in the video, it gonna tells you about what is the STAR approach, how you can apply that.
Another key interview technique used is behaviour-based interviewing. The theory behind this technique is that the best indicator of future behaviour is past behaviour. When an interviewer asks you to describe a situation in which you were involved, they are looking at how you responded using a specific example. Think STAR. The STAR model breaks answers into 3 segments. 1. Description of situation or task. 2. The action you took. And 3, the final measurable result. It's very important that all aspects of the STAR format are used. It won't help your case at all if you thoroughly describe the situation, but forget to indicate the result. Likewise, it's no good explaining how well it turned out if you haven't first given a clear picture of the situation and the role you played in solving the problem. Let's look at a STAR question in action in a panel interview.
Alex, could you please provide us with an example of a difficult situation or problem that you faced and how you went about resolving that problem and what the outcome was?
Whenever difficult things come up, I always manage to get a good end result.
That's good to know.
Okay, look, can you give us a specific example of a problem you faced and talk us through how you handled it?
Well, whenever we have group assignments to complete at uni, there's always someone who doesn't pick up the slack. And you've always got to make sure that it's all complete, otherwise you don't get a good mark. Where was I? Yeah, I always end up with a good result, so that's why people want me to do it.
When we look at Alex's body language, he's clearly not engaged. To the panel, this indicates that Alex is not keen to be there and is not enthusiastic about the job. Also, Alex appears overly confident, almost dismissive. It could be that Alex is nervous, and that's why he is behaving this way. But unfortunately, the panel can only make a decision based on their own observations. So Alex needs to be more aware of how he's coming across. both in his answers and his non-verbal communication. And don't forget to always switch off your mobile. When we look at how Alex answered the question, he wasn't thinking star. No specific situation task was described. The panel members even prompted to get a bit more specific information, but still didn't elaborate. No specific action given. Alex hasn't talked about what he specifically did to solve the problem. Finally, Alex embellished the result by saying that the excellent mark was all due to his own work. Let's look at how the candidate may have responded more appropriately.
James, could you please provide us with an example of a difficult situation or problem that you faced and how you went about resolving it and what the outcome was?
Well, the first one that comes to mind was a situation at university where I was coordinating a group assignment where we had to run a mock company and hand in all the paperwork and financials for the end of the financial year.
So what did you find?
Well, since I was a group coordinator, there was a lot of writing on me to make it as easy as possible. But there was one person who never showed up to the meetings or contributed to the assignment in any way.
So what did you do?
Well, the group and I had a meeting to decide how we should go forward with that. And it was decided that I would have a meeting with the person concerned and see what could be done about it. I had the meeting and they were at once very apologetic for not coming along, but at the same time they explained that they had an awful lot of family issues going on at home. And I was just sorry for them, but at the same time I had to be conscious that it wasn't fair to the rest of the group.
And saying it would be a situation, what did you do next?
Well, I thought long and hard about it. It was a tricky situation, but I eventually decided to have a meeting with that person and course lecturer.
And then what happened?
Well, the course lecturer was very understanding. She gave the person an exemption from the assignment and said that they could get the marks back at a later date, which allowed us to reallocate all the different bits and pieces in the assignment out to all the other members of the group. And therefore we managed to complete everything on time and get everything done. And we did really well for the assignment. We actually got a high distinction.
Right. So, when we look back again to our question, we can see that James was really thinking star this time. He described a specific situation, talked through the different steps he specifically took to resolve it, and then concluded concisely with the end result. He spoke to each panel member in turn and maintained good eye contact with the group. James's presentation is also much more impressive. He has shown leadership and initiative in his decision-making process. From his answer, the panel has a clear picture of how well James works in a group to solve issues as they arise. So, in summary, there are some good lessons to be learned about what does and doesn't come across well in an interview situation. My top 3 do's and don'ts are: do answer all questions using the STAR technique. Do maintain eye contact with all panel members. And do be focused, confident and enthusiastic. Don't be vague with your responses. Don't be too casual, overly confident or friendly. And don't forget your body language. Be sure to sit up straight, don't fidget, and focus on the questions and your answers.
Okay, so the video is a bit long because it gave you the 2 examples, contrasting example, what is called a good interview process and what is not. Okay, and I highlighted, sorry about this, the STAR approach here for your reference. When you apply the model, what kind of elements you need to put in the STAR technique. Okay. So I think it's approaching 11, so let's take a break. Okay, 10 minutes and we'll come back to continue the lecture on that.
it's not because I really dislike it that I was manage the team you did, like going to work. I don't understand. It's interesting. It's just really interesting.
Yeah, I just want to take credit since my solution. I'm just like, I'm going to do it.
China school in I think he sent the invitation on September so.
That's me, no? I'm not registered?
Yeah. Oh. So you're still pending?
You're still pending in the system.
Your school, China school email.
The one, the password you sent me, right? Well, not the password, but the link.
You registered by the school email, right? Did you? No.
My school email, yes. This is my school email.
I haven't gotten anything to register. I know, right? Because this is me, and this is also me.
So you are able to sign in.
Oh.
Yes, but this is not my school email.
Okay. Did you try your school email?
Your school email.
I didn't, but let me, they said, do I register with a guest account or like just log in?
So you use your ID, number, and CNU.
You need a guest account if you use your email address, and then you put in a password.
Oh, because I was looking at the instructions. They said it would send you an email when you're able to register.
School email.
No, I didn't get send the email. So the email, you click on it.
I didn't get an email though. I did use the school email.
No, it doesn't matter because I didn't use the school email and I got it.
I'll try. Hold on.
The thing is, initially when I sent it, I didn't use my school email. But when he sent the link, I didn't use my
You don't have to participate anymore, and like if you participate twice, it's gonna say keep it, and they will get it. Like, no, why are you doing that? You don't even know my name anymore right now.
他没有，他说他要线上看这个 video，他说是好像只有30分钟，是没有把全部的都上去。
哦，有4段。
哎，你是在
YouTube 上面。
是 YouTube 上吗？
对。
可是因为我自己点进去看，我也只有看到第一段。
就是我放在一个那个叫什么？
是没有公开那个意思。
哦，好像有可能。
对，因为你是 unlisted 嘛，你要把那个。就是。对，你这边一定看得到。因为我点进去你的 channel 里面是。
哦，所以大家只看到。
对，大家只看到第一段。
好。
然后你改好之后，就是在那个announcement上面跟大家讲。
Because the email is an invitation. Yeah. And then you apply.
Yeah, I didn't get the email.
So once you send your email and you invite and then you apply for the test and then you put in a new pattern.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. I don't know how you have it.
Yes, no.
No, I didn't get the
I'll
email.
send you that.
Thank you.
Which one do you prefer?
Either one is fine.
Okay, please try again with the school email.
I see. I just got it.
Thank you.
Now we got cooking with gas.
Because I really started doing just apply. So she explained it to like it's so much easier. Like you're like, okay, so I understand. So she was a social instructor. She just did that information and just use one question and just apply it to you. And since we did that it's literally like 3 minutes. Yeah, sure. It's literally just 300. So I don't have to worry about how many pages. So it's literally just like a breakdown of your business. Just try to take the notes. So it's very like it's straightforward. And she will get to there's so many persons out there
So can we like log into the internet now that we have an account, or is it just because we're like a guest that we can't use it?
I'm not sure, but I can type in like.
I could have come to
have you received the ex-culture welcome email yet?
Yeah.
Yes. Have you finished the first test yet? No. The deadline is on 2nd of October. Okay. Try to do that on time. Okay. And once you finish that, you will be automatically assigned to a quite diverse team with about 5 to 6 students from different universities, okay, around the world. Okay, so we continue the lecture on that. So we just talk about a very practical technique plus that approach when during a job interview, especially it's particularly useful when you answer the behavioral-based questions. Okay. Right. The third element in the strategic management model is about the message strategy. Okay, so when it comes to structure your message, here comes the very practical several questions you need to think about throughout the process. So instead of structuring your message as ideas just pop out in your mind, I think it's rather difficult for your audience to follow your message like that. So you should try to structure your communication process in the following ways. This first picture illustrates the audience memory curve. Okay, it says that most audience remember what's in the beginning and by the end, but not in the middle during the communication process. Do you agree with that? Yeah, right? So in this regard, what can you do? If you are the communicator, what can you do? Yes? Tell me important thing in the first. Okay. And repeat them by the end. But what about something in the middle? Just well, like I just said, that most people receive though just say something important in the beginning and by the end, and just never bury important message in the middle of your communication process. But I think it's not realistic, isn't it? So you may know that when you start a conversation with other people, but you hardly know that when you can finish the conversation and when you are still communicating with them. Okay, and not to mention that people have different perception towards time. Okay, so how you can measure the beginning or the end of the conversation. So in this regard, how can we overcome retention dip in the middle of the communication process? So these are some approaches. I'll say. Keep in mind that psychological experiments show most people can't remember more than about 5 times at the same time. 5 things at the same time. Okay? So when conveying a lot of information, you should help your audience by cutting the main message into no more than 5 pieces. Smaller sections, and this will allow you to create a mini memory curve in between and increasing the overall audience retention. And sometimes you are also required to repeat yourself because people should remember what they're being exposed to several times. And if your audience can't understand which part of your communication is more important, why not helping them? So you can flex signals importance to your audience if you think it is necessary. And also you can utilize the unexpected tricks to grab their attention. For example, you can cracking some jokes or telling your personal stories, experience during the process. And I often do this and find it quite useful when students started to lose their attention or feel sleepy during the lectures. Okay. And finally, you may use the visual presentation or design to reinforce your communication to your audience. So, such as for instance, during the lecture, I use the slides, right? I've been creating a lecture in stimulating students' learning interests. But if you do the communication with other people properly, you can show them some pictures if you're sharing your personal story with them in order to emphasize the things you want to talk with them. Okay. And the next element of message strategy is concerned with the organization of the message flows. For instance, it's rather informative or it's rather persuasive. If you do the informative message, you try to emphasize the key points, the key questions, highlight the key questions and steps in the process. By contrast, if you do the persuasive style, basically you just provide some recommendations, suggestions for the audience, and we can talk about the pros and cons of these suggestions and also alternatives to compare the possible solutions. Okay, I want to give you the video about a Lenovo's campaign in comparison to the Apple's campaign. Okay, so to see throughout the video, try to think about how Lenovo wants to express. Is it informative or persuasive message style? Okay. It's a little bit sarcasm in the video, right? So I don't know if you remember that when Steve Jobs introduced the first product of MacBook Air, that he took off on a thin envelope, right? So this is how Lenovo wants to beat the competition, okay? So which type of style you think that in the video? Is it informative or is it persuasive? I would say persuasive, right? It's not directly saying that the competitor's product sucks. You actually do a comparison between the you choose, right? So that's persuasive message. And people usually, I think business usually do that throughout a campaign or advertisements, okay? And the final element in message strategy is called storytelling technique, okay? I think the approach can allow you to make emotional connection with the audience very much. And increased audience interest and retention. But why you tell stories? Okay, business stories have many aspects benefits in facilitating communication. For instance, a story can make abstract notions such as cross-cultural management more real and meaningful. Okay, and it can increases the stickiness to decrease the distance between you and your audience and become closer. It means that you actually make a connection through telling a story with the audience. And people are not inspired to act by reasons alone. Okay? So stories allow you to unite your ideas with people's emotion by capturing their attention, and they can stir in their imagination and making them more likely to remember and act on your ideas. For instance, I think I told a story about a fisherman at the beginning when I introduced the concept of communication. This is why I want to do, because I want to help you to understand the importance of communication, essentially content the transfer and understand the meaning. Okay? And finally, by telling stories, you can build a very good relationship with the audience because you are essentially creating a common grounds to facilitate the communication. Okay? But how to tell stories? Basically, you need to choose the right time to use the story. For instance, as approaching by the end of a lecture, I don't think it's proper time to tell you a long story, isn't it? And you need to make sure that your story has a point. Okay? So many people are quite chatty to share their stories with others, but often when they finish their stories, no one understands what's the point you want to make. Okay? And therefore, it may be better to use the more classical themes of the story in order to create the common grounds and increase the opportunities that the other people will easily capture your ideas. Okay? And engaging the audience with their own story, I think another approach. Instead of telling them your story, you can also try to engage them to tell their own story, share their story with you. And that's why, in addition to tell you my personal experience throughout the cross-communication process, cross-cultural communication or management issues, I usually like to like you to share yours in the class. I often ask you some questions about what's your experience towards certain question, so on and so forth. This not only helps you understand the concept I tend to deliver in the lectures, but also give you the opportunity to reflect your ideas on the relevant concepts. Okay? And the next one about the strategic management model is the channel choice. Okay? So I think it's concerned with the method you use to send your message. Okay? This table of exhibits shows the various channel choices, and this channel differs in their capacity to convey information. So some are rich because they have the ability to handle multiple cues simultaneously. For instance, face-to-face conversation, right? That's very personal. You can get all the information at once throughout the eye contact, throughout the verbal words, so on and so forth. And as the exhibit illustrates, like I just said, face-to-face conversation scores highest in channel richness because it transmits the most information per communication process. And they also use multiple information cues such as the words, the postures, the facial expressions, eye contact, so on and so forth. And others are lean because they scores low in their factors. So in-person written media, such as the formal reports or the emails, the rate the lowest in the richness. Okay? And the choice of one channel over another depends on whether the message is routine. Routine messages tend to be straightforward and have a minimum of ambiguity. Therefore, they can be efficiently communicated through channels that are lower in their richness. For instance, through emails, through reports, through bulletins, so on and so forth. Non-routine messages, on the other hand, tend to be complicated and they have the potential for misunderstanding. So they are suitable for rich channels in communication, of course. That's the channel choice. And the final part of communication model is the cultural strategy. Okay, we discussed the role of culture in international business activities in the previous lectures. So you will know that culture will influence all aspects of communication process across countries, across different regions, industry, organization, even individual level. And the key question in strategic communication strategy regarding culture is that how do cultural differences between a communicator and the audience affect the communication outcome, right? And I believe that the answer is quite straightforward. Cultural differences may be the reason why communication is initiated, because obviously by learning purpose, because the audience maybe want to learn something from a communicator, right? But as the communication begins, cultural differences become the barriers in communication because they may lead to potential conflict or misunderstanding as a result of miscommunication, okay? And this is how we call the cross-cultural risks in international business contexts. Speaking of cross-cultural risks, how can we minimize such risks from the managerial perspective? Okay. These are some approaches for information from the IB textbook. So first of all, we need to be able to recognize and assess there's existence of cultural differences between you and your audience, especially across international business contexts. And you have gained such knowledge from the lecture in the past few weeks. Okay. And secondly, you need to acquire factual interpreting knowledge about the other culture. And I think the best way is try to speak the language. Okay. So have you ever wondered that why, given being the largest population in the world, for instance Chinese or Mandarin, has not yet to be the major foreign language, but English has? Why is that? Colonialization, I agree with that. Are there other reasons, much more practical, relevant to you?
Easier to like not mess up.
Oh yeah, that's a practical reason. Do you need to learn Mandarin here in Taiwan? Take the classes or no? Okay.
It's not required.
It's not required. But so have you ever taken a Chinese course here? You can easily do a comparison. I agree with you that it's actually theoretically from a linguistic perspective, compared with English, Mandarin or Chinese, is too difficult to learn Excel. Okay, so it's easier for people to speak broken English than broken Mandarin. Okay, so because both sense in English you can just speak some vocabulary and people easily understand that, right? But in Chinese, if you say something, then we have different tones. So if you said it wrong, it means completely different things, right? So that's the language issue. And next, you need to avoid a cultural bias and develop the cross-cultural skills, in particular, the cultural intelligence. Okay, so remember in the previous lecture, I talked about the three orientations in culture, including ethnocentric, polycentric, and geocentric orientation, right? And by avoiding cultural bias, it means that you need to avoid acting ethnocentric orientation when conducting businesses in foreign country. Because if you do ethnocentric orientation, it means that you use your own perspective to judge others' culture. It's not fair, right? And but in terms of cultural intelligence, you heard about I don't know if you heard about CQ. CQ essentially means cultural intelligence. Refers to an individual's capacity to adapt to or be effective in new cultural contexts. Okay. And obviously a higher CQ leads to a better cultural judgment and decision making and better adjustment to new international environments. And it also has a positive influence on the job performance and on the intention of the employees to work abroad. If you have higher CQ, it's easier for you to survive in the foreign countries, right? But that's why nowadays many companies, especially multinational corporations, they have developed cultural training programs to improve their employees' CQ. Okay, and based on the prior study, there are some suggestions for you as individual to improve your CQ. Okay, so I also posted a link about the CQ test. There's a general question about CQ. Okay, to test your CQ in the beginning, and if you have time, you can do it by yourself, okay? It's not compulsory. But if you do that, by the end of this week, I will provide the average scores of the whole class, and also the typical average scores across the business school in across different international universities. Okay? We actually had a collaboration with the other university a lot of professors in our university want to test what's the average score of business school students in terms of NCQ. Okay, that would be interesting to find out what will be the scores by the end. Okay, so let's talk about the practical tactic strategy improving your CQ. So the first one is that, of course, need to broaden your mindset, right? That is to read the foreign newspapers, maybe the news online, watch foreign movies, to read foreign books, and be aware of international news. Okay, that's the practical one first step. And also make sure of experiential learning. That means that use the opportunities that pop up to work abroad or travel to other cultures, and surround yourself with people who stem from other cultures as well. For instance, engage with expatriate colleagues or become part of global virtual team projects in your company if you work in the organization. And do not be afraid to practice the trial and error approach when interacting with people from different cultures. And third step is to monitor and adapt future strategy. That means that consciously monitor how you act and react in diverse situations, identify successful and unsuccessful intercultural interactions. And keep a journal note of your reflections, and which may even be used as a base to discuss the intercultural interaction with the mentor, or adapt the future strategy accordingly. Okay, so that means that if your organization always, if your organization offer kind of a cultural training program, that is very helpful. Try to engage yourself to such program and ask questions to other people. And the next one is to view interaction from different perspectives. That means try to view issues from more than your own perspective. Okay? Apply a proactive analysis and try to appreciate the differences and similarities between seemingly conflicting perspectives as well. And the final one is practice non-judgmental observation. Okay, I think this is the most important suggestion. Do not possess the ethnocentric orientation towards others. That's the key. Okay. And let's watch the final video to wrap up today's class. This is a very critical one because this interviewee actually worked in a multinational corporation and a kind of businessman working in the investment banking in the Middle East. And he merely speaks Arabian. He offers his personal experience and tactics while working with the Arabic people and how he deals with the cross-cultural risks.
I'm Steve Clemmy. I'm an 85 graduate of Thunderbird, and I'm a managing director at JP Morgan. I'm responsible for our Middle East business in the private bank. Well, there's something called the comfort zone, and I think people who don't like to experience another culture are very firmly set in their comfort zone. What I like is I like the adventure, and I like the adrenaline rush of meeting somebody new or being into a new situation. Being private banking is a very conservative business. Being JP Morgan is a very conservative company, but there's still a lot of adventure that happens when you're dealing with another culture. But I think the most important thing is to prepare, and then prepare some more. So it's important to do a lot of contingency planning, to think, what if something doesn't go right? What if somebody new comes into the meeting that you didn't expect? To read up on the people that you think you're going to be meeting, to read up on the culture, to read up on current events. I think it's very important when you start a negotiation to find some way to connect with that individual on a personal level. So it would be nice to know whether they were educated in the U.S. or whether they have a common interest that you do, to establish some kind of a bond. Because you're going to enter a relationship with this person, and the more you know about them, the smoother the relationship will go. I was raised on a farm in Iowa. And in many ways we have the same core values, because I grew up where it's about the family, and it's about the church. And in the Middle East, it's also very much about the family and about their religion. They pray 5 times a day. They're very devout people, and so the religion is around them like a cocoon at all times. And I think that kind of comes through to your core values and the beliefs that you have. And it's a very, very comparable type of situation. Well, I think the interesting thing is because I do cover the Middle East and I don't speak Arabic other than some basic casual conversation, is, for example, one of my largest clients doesn't speak a word of English, and I don't speak enough Arabic, so we always deal through a translator. And he watches my body language, he watches my vocabulary, so he watches for sincerity, for ethics, for values, and so on and so forth. And he's the kind of person that we hug and we kiss when on the cheek. We greet each other very, very warmly. We have a very strong friendship, even though we don't speak the same language.